This video is brought to you with the support of TrueFire. Practice smart and play hard with TrueFire. Welcome to 5-Watt World, where we're interested in helping you get the most music from the least gear. I'm tackling the broad history of Gretsch guitars, and I'm adding many playing examples that I didn't have access to in the past. I've made separate videos in the past on the DuoJet and the 6120 history, and if you have a favorite model, you could go to those videos for details. So if you've always wondered about the guitar company from Brooklyn, you're in the right place, because this is the 5-Watt World short history of Gretsch guitars. If you like this style of video, be sure to subscribe. And to support what we do, grab a t-shirt, hoodie, or a 5-Watt World Barber Collaboration overdrive pedal. To become an even bigger part of 5-Watt World, sign up for the Friends of 5-Watt on Patreon. There's a friend level to suit any budget. And if you've always wanted to have your own YouTube channel but didn't know where to start, buy my YouTube Mastery for Musicians course. It's all the things I wish I knew when I started. All the links are in the description. Gretsch was founded in 1883 by Friedrich Gretsch, and after moving to a larger space on South 4th Street in 1894, the 38-year-old passed away the next year. This led the company to be run by his wife and then 15-year-old son, Fred. As the saying goes, Fred put his back into it, and by 1916, they were in their fourth factory building, the 10-story Gretsch Building No. 4. Fred Gretsch turned the company over to his son, Fred Jr. in 1942. After World War II, Fred Gretsch Jr. returned to the company and ran it in its glory years from 1942 until 1967. The post-war prosperity propelled Gretsch to immense worldwide success, from '53 on with the explosion in pop music. In the early 50s, Rosemary Clooney and Frank Sinatra sang popular jazz hits with newfound post-war optimism, while at the same time the guitar was a driving force in the growing popularity of the blues of Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker. And Les Paul was paving new roads in instrumental jazz with his new solid body guitar. Nashville electric guitar heroes Merle Travis and Chet Atkins were making waves in country and western, and Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins were forging rockabilly. Music that would influence Eddie Cochran and Elvis Presley, having a long shadow of impact that stretches to the present day. Rock and roll with its blend of southern blues, gospel, and a strong backbeat expressed the feelings of this newfound market of teenagers. They had some discretionary income brought about by the boom times they were living in. The electric guitar was quickly establishing itself as the voice of the era, and at the turn of the decade we saw solid body guitars in the Fender Broadcaster in 1950 and the Gibson Les Paul in 1952, moving to prominence. Musicians on shows like American Bandstand sent the image of the new guitars into every home, and the appearance of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones on The Ed Sullivan Show would have lasting impact into the mid-60s. Gretsch used their company name on their own guitars for the first time in 1937 with their new flat-top 6-string model acoustics. These models were both bigger and louder. Gretsch built a solid reputation alongside the better-rated Gibson and Epiphone guitars at the time. They sold their first Gretsch-branded Spanish electric guitar in 1939. It was called the Electromatic Spanish and was made by Kay in Chicago. But the guitar had little impact in the marketplace and was dropped during the years of World War II. After the war, Fred Gretsch Jr. took over the company, moving from his position as company treasurer. Now that everyone was back from the war, there was a company meeting where they decided to start building electric guitars in earnest. And this is where Jimmy Webster makes his entrance in our story. Webster was a professional piano tuner, pianist, and guitarist who was hired to head the guitar division at Gretsch. The first guitar, released in 1949, revived the Electromatic Spanish line. It was a non-cutaway body with F-holes. It had a single-coil pickup, the DeArmond pickup, made by Rowe Industries in Ohio, a company run by Harry DeArmond. A few years later, the pickup would be given its own Gretsch name, the Dynasonic, and would be their main pickup until 1958. By '51, they had released two Electro 2 models, the 6187 and the 6188, with 16-inch bodies, and the 6192 with a 17-inch body. In the early 50s, Gretsch seemed content to produce these few models, all the while keeping an eye on the developing solid-body guitars from Fender and Gibson. Famously, Fender had launched their first solid body with the name Broadcaster, and since Gretsch had a trademark on the name Broadcaster for one of their drum lines, they famously wired Fender asking them to change the name, which Fender politely did. Gretsch was very surprised when Gibson decided to enter the solid body market. Fred Gretsch and Ted McCarty were friends, and McCarty remembers Fred asking him, "How could you do this? Anyone with a bandsaw and a router can make a solid body guitar. I just can't believe Gibson would do it." But when he saw the guitars selling, Fred Jr. changed his mind, and in 1953, Gretsch launched their first semi-solid body style guitar, the Duojet, for $230. The new guitar looked like a solid body, but it was actually semi-solid, and because of that, it was lighter and had a unique sound that would attract players to this type of Gretsch over the years. Where Fender used a plank of ash and Gibson used a sandwich of mahogany and maple, Gretsch routed out the mahogany base to make a sort of sectional box, leaving wood where the cabling and electric components ran. They then added a laminated maple top. The pickups were then mounted to the top. Unusually, during its early years, the front of the Duojet had a black plastic covering, the same as they had used on the Gretsch drums. The company was used to adding this plastic laminate over the top, and this was a simple solution. That early control layout started Gretsch's common practice of putting a master volume control on the Cutaway. These early de-Armand-equipped guitars generally had 4 knobs and 1 switch: the master volume, a master volume for each pickup, and a master tone. The new Duojet also carried the Melita Synchrosonic bridge that had appeared on other models the year before. It was the first bridge that offered independent intonation adjustment for each string, allowing the guitar to be more correctly in tune with itself. This preceded Gibson's Tune-O-Matic bridge by at least a year. Hank Garland was used to promote the Duojet guitars for Gretsch during the 50s. Along with the black Duojet in '54, we also saw the launch of the Roundup. The model was an orange fever dream of cowboy kitsch with a branded G into the top and belt buckle style tailpiece. Gretsch entered the 50s with the 3rd generation Electromatic series electric archtop guitars already having some maturity, all sharing the Dynasonic pickup technology. Webster had established himself as Gretsch's idea man, and '54 was his year. He led Gretsch in implementing custom colors, the first company to do so, with its Cadillac green, Jaguar tan, and copper mist. The colors came from the same DuPont car color catalog that Fender and Gibson would use later on. It was also his idea to use the laminates from the drum division to cover the tops of the Duojet and create the Silverjet guitars. '53 and '54 saw changes in the hollow body line as well. The Electro 2s were dropped and other models were renamed. The 16-inch non-cutaway model became the Corvette, and the 17-inch became the Country Club in 1953. The Country Club had a 17-inch wide body that was 3 3/4 inches deep with a laminated maple top. It had a 3-piece maple neck with a bound ebony fingerboard. At first, it had block markers, but moved to the hump top blocks in 1955. 2 Dynasonic pickups and the now standard 4-knob and 1-switch control layout. In the wake of Gibson's success with Les Paul as an endorser, Webster looked around and set his sights on Chet Atkins for Gretsch's first signature model guitar. Atkins had been an early innovator with electric guitars, adding various pickups to Gibson and then D'Angelico guitars. With these early tools in hands, he had a string of guitar hits that left players wondering how he was doing it. So he was already doing well when Gretsch approached him about building him a signature guitar. Chet even had a conversation with Les Paul about Les's deal with Gibson, as Chet's brother, Jimmy, was playing bass in Les's band. On the other end of things, Webster was having trouble convincing Fred Gretsch Jr. of the value of the deal with Atkins. Fred was wondering why they should, quote, hire some hillbilly guitar player, end quote, to help sell their guitars. Atkins would eventually give in to Webster's promise to let him design his own model guitar. The result of that collaboration would be the now legendary Chet Atkins hollow body Model 6120. The first prototype, the guitar that was set to Atkins in '54, was sort of a special order streamliner model. The guitar was given a second Dynasonic pickup, a lightly figured maple top, a 21-fret fingerboard, and golden hardware. Remember, Gretsch was based in Brooklyn and may have had some interesting ideas about what a guitar for a Nashville-based artist should look like. It was the marketing guys in New York that cowboyed up the guitar. It was given the distinctive amber red finish that faded to a transparent orange. A large G was branded into the face of the guitar. A steer's head was inlaid on the unbound headstock. It was equipped with gold arrow control knobs and a fancy belt buckle style tailpiece and cactuses and steer heads etched on the block markers of a rosewood fingerboard. By the time it got to production, there was the gold lucite Chet Atkins signature signpost pickguard as well. Atkins actually didn't care for the kitschy country details, and as he and the guitar became more popular, he slowly had them removed from the later models. At that point, Atkins requested a Bigsby vibrato be added along with a brass nut for better sustain. A second prototype was quickly created. This guitar had the fixed-arm Bigsby B6 and an aluminum Bigsby bridge, a fancier maple top, brass nut, and the gold lucite pickguard. There's footage of Atkins playing his 1954 hit, Mr. Sandman, on that guitar. By the time the production guitar was ready, Atkins had requested a 22-fret fingerboard with a 24.5-inch scale length. The body was 15.5-inch wide, though the catalog listed it as 16, and it was 2 3/4 inches deep. Gretsch was in the habit of building guitars in batches of 50 or 100 units. And with these additions, Gretsch began producing the model in late 54 and began selling them in early 55. Along with the 6120, they brought the Roundup model specs over and released a solid-body Chet Atkins signature guitar. These were also preloaded with the New York City's idea of a country guitar. Building in small batches, Gretsch constantly improved and tweaked the guitar models, and this continued with the 6120. As such, it was in an almost constant state of change coming from the factory. This makes it particularly hard to date the specific features to a specific production run of guitars. Given the success of the new model, it might seem surprising to learn that there were only 3 batches of 6120s produced for 1955. The Brooklyn factory at the time was only capable of producing about 2,000 guitars a year, and 8 other Gretsch models were also being produced there. In Edward Ball's book of the 6120, he estimates that fewer than 250 6120s were made during the first year of 55. But between 55 and 61, there were approximately 3,800 6120s built. At release, the guitars listed for $360 plus the case. And this is at a time when Gibson's popular ES-175 listed for $290. Even at this upscale price, the sales numbers show that 6120 was a big success. It was during this first batch of the 6120s that the fingerboard transitioned to 22 frets. Notably, Eddie Cochran's 1955 would come from only the second batch of 6120s ever built. For this reason, guitars from that batch are very desirable in the vintage market. Cochran produced hits as early as 1956, but it was his 1958 Summertime Blues that made him an international star and influenced the likes of Jeff Beck and Pete Townsend. After the success of Atkins as an endorser, Webson began working on his ultimate Gretsch, the White Falcon. Launched in 55, it had a 17-inch wide body and a gleaming white paint finish. There was a new wing-shaped headstock, and the entire guitar was wrapped in gold sparkle binding. Another clear reminder that these guitars were coming from a company that also built drums. The dealer reaction to the White Falcon was so overwhelming that Gretsch was thrilled to accept the orders that poured in at the show. Cost was never a consideration when designing the Falcon. The catalog stated simply, quote, "For the artist player whose caliber justifies and demands the utmost in striking beauty, luxurious styling, and peak tonal performance, and who is willing to pay the price." The White Falcon listed for a cool $600 in 1955, approximately equivalent to $6,900 today. It was about $200 more expensive than the next highest price model in the catalog. The only thing comparable in the Gibson catalog was the Super 400 at $690. The Falcon was such a big hit that dealers that hadn't been interested in carrying Gretsch before sat up and took notice. Like the release of the companion solid body to the Chet Atkins 6120, in 56, the White Penguin was released as a companion to the Falcon. It carried the cosmetic features of the White Falcon over to the semi-solid duojet style guitar construction. But the Penguin naming, along with the high price, led to very few White Penguins being sold, and it didn't even sell well enough to be included in any of the catalogs. In October of 56, there were 11 electric guitars in the catalog, 6 hollow bodies, the Clipper, Streamliner, Convertible, Chet Atkins hollow body, Country Club, and White Falcon, and 5 semi-solid guitars, Duojet, Jet Firebird, Silverjet, Roundup, and Chet Atkins Solid Body. Dwayne Eddy turned out a string of instrumental records with a classic tone that would long be associated with Gretsch, the twang. This came from concentrating on playing melodies on the bass strings of his de-armament-equipped 6120 and his use of the Bigsby. He purchased his 6120 brand new in September of 1957. 56 also saw Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps with Cliff Gallup on lead guitar playing a Duojet. The guitar was either a 55 or a 56 with de-armament pickups and a Bigsby, and Gallup got that big Gretsch sound from it. And of course, Bo Diddley was an early user of Gretsch guitars with his use of a Jet Firebird and his signature custom rectangular guitar. The rectangular guitar came about by Diddley first putting a Gretsch neck on a body of his own construction, but he soon realized that the limitations of his own handiwork, and he approached Gretsch about building him the rectangular guitar. They eventually made him 4 guitars in that shape between 58 and 62. He used mostly other guitars for recording, but he kept his signature shape for the stage use. In 59, Diddley worked with a Gretsch employee to build his custom Jupiter Thunderbird guitar. The guitar was later gifted to Billy Gibbons, who used it on some recordings before working with Gretsch to release his own as a production Billy Bo Jupiter Thunderbird model. And Neil Finn from Crowded House plays a 57 Firebird, much like the one that Bo Diddley used. I've been using TrueFire for over a decade, so they were the perfect partner for 5 Watt World. To take advantage of the variety of TrueFire's courses, I've always subscribed to the All Access Pass, which lets you use everything in the TrueFire catalog. As a viewer of 5 Watt World, you get an exclusive 50% discount on the All Access Pass. Or you can use a 35% off code for any of the courses in the catalog by simply using the dedicated links at the top of the video description. I've learned so much from TrueFire that I'm confident that you can too. Sign up using the links in the description to support 5 Watt World and get some great lessons at the same time. Practice smart and play hard with TrueFire. I'd like to thank TrueFire for their support in making this video. Chet Atkins had been unhappy with the sound of the Dynasonic pickups from the start, so when he bought an amp from inventor Ray Butts, he began talking to him about designing a new pickup with less noise, less hum. After listening to Chet's concerns about noise and balance between the pickups, Butts set out to make a new style of pickup altogether. In an interview, Butts remembered, "My idea from the beginning was to build a humbucking pickup. I knew about the concept from working with Transformers, and Ampex had used the humbucking principle in the pickup of their tape recorder heads." Butts built a prototype and showed it to Atkins, who then pitched it to Gretsch. This happened to coincide with the desire at Gretsch to drop the de-armament single-coil pickups. What had once been an exclusive arrangement had eroded as de-armament had begun selling the pickups to many cheaper guitar brands. Butts worked closely with Gretsch on the pickup specs and the new control layout to go with the new pickups. Gretsch filed their patent application for the new pickup on January 22, 1957, and it was granted on June 30, 1959. Gretsch debuted the pickups at the Summer NAMM show in 57, the same year that Gibson was displaying their own new humbucking pickup. Though Butts contended that he had been the first to develop the idea, having pictures of Chet playing a guitar with prototype pickups from much earlier, Gibson complained. In the end, it happened that Fred Gretsch and Ted McCarty were good friends, and so they agreed to each let the matter slide without incident. Gretsch named the new pickup the Filtertron, and by 58 it was used throughout the line. Though they used a similar approach, choices in construction led to a pickup that sounds very different than the one that the folks at Gibson built. The pickup covers were emblazoned with the words "patent applied for," and these would be there until 1960 when the actual patent number would appear after the patent was approved. As part of the move to the pickups in 58, the tone knob was removed from the lower bout and a second switch was added above the strings, providing tone settings. This switch, affectionately named by users the mud switch, had 3 settings. In the top setting, there was the most substantial roll-off of treble. The middle had no roll-off, and the lower position had about halfway between roll-off of the top position. The Chet Atkins signature lineup was expanded in 58 with the introduction of a new single pickup Tennessean model, 6119, with a cherry red finish and a single bridge Filtertron pickup, unbound fretboard, and a unique black signpost signature pickguard. The Tennessean was effectively a less expensive 6120, with just one of the new Filtertron pickups. So Gretsch now had 3 Chet Atkins hollow body models. Alongside the Tennessean, a new Chet Atkins model, the Country Gentleman, was released. named after a hit that Chet had had 4 years earlier. The Country Gentleman model was an attempt to offer an upscale version of the orange 6120 that had sold so well. Unlike the 6120's 15.5-inch body, the Country Gentleman had a full 17-inch wide body like the White Falcon. With its tamer walnut finish, painted on sound holes, Filtertron pickups, and a Bigsby, it was the embodiment of all the changes Chet was looking for in his signature guitar up to that point. Gibson had popularized the thin-line depth with its Birdland and ES350T guitars, and would release the ES335 that same year in '58. The 1959 6120 saw the addition of the zero fret, which Gretsch referred to as the fret nut. This was a result of Atkins' style and his desire for lower action, and it was also much easier to dependably set up at the factory. Famously, Brian Setzer's main 6120 was a 1959 model, and for this reason, many fans seek out the guitars from that year, but we'll come to Setzer later on. The end of the 50s also saw Gretsch manufacturing their own space control bridges that were much simpler than the Melita. And there was the arrival of the neoclassical fingerboard with the thumbnail markers as they moved many of the fretboards from rosewood to ebony. In '58, Gretsch launched a stereo wiring as an option in the Country Club and White Falcon guitars. Designed by Ray Butts, it sent the output of the bass strings to one output and the treble to another. For once, Gibson had to follow Gretsch's lead and offered their own stereo guitars in '59 as an option in the 345 and the 355. Gretsch modified their system, making it even more complex, providing more switches for various tones. It's for this reason that these unique 1959 Gretsch guitars are the bane of guitar techs the world over. But at the time, Gretsch crowed about the innovation and put a pair of White Falcons on the cover of the '59 catalog. But Webster and Gretsch overestimated the experimental nature of guitarists, and the options saw very few takers. The 1960 6120 may be one of the most heard on the radio in history, and most people don't even know it was a Gretsch. In 1970, Joe Walsh, that seeming Santa Claus of the guitar history, gave Pete Townsend a 1960 6120 along with a '59 Fender Bassman amp. Townsend remembered, "I opened the case and it was bright orange, and I thought, ugh, it's horrible. I hate it. I went home, went into my studio, plugged it in, and it totally wrecked me. It's the best guitar I've got now." He went on to use the guitar on The Who's 1971 album, Who's Next, and said that Won't Get Fooled Again and Bargain are examples of the sound of that guitar going through that Bandmaster. Starting in '60, Gretsch had begun making many of their hollow body guitars thinner as the thin-line Country Gentleman had proved a popular change. Subsequent batches of guitars were thinner and thinner, a quarter of an inch at a time. By 1961, the 6120 was down to a body depth of 2 1/4 inches, but the biggest change would be yet to come with the new double cutaway design. The White Falcon was the first model to go double cut in 1960, and the 6120 and the Country Gentleman went double in '61. The 6120 gained the sealed body and painted on F-holds, and Gretsch, ever excited for a new naming opportunity, dubbed it the Electrotone. The semi-solid guitars started to go double cut starting in '61 as well. Very few Chet Atkins solid body guitars were built that year, and double cut White Penguins are even more rare. Not happy just to go double cut, Webster sought out other ways to differentiate Gretsch in the marketplace. They added a mechanical damper that they called a muffler. You could bring the dampers up to the strings with control knobs on the top. It might be easy to assume that Gretsch was mimicking the double cuts from Gibson, but Chet Atkins was actually pushing for the change as he preferred the closed F-hole style of the Country Gentleman guitar. And so the 6120 saw the move to the double cut body style and the new Electone 6120 with sealed F-holes. Though the body remained 15.5 inches wide, it was further reduced to just 2 inches deep. George Harrison started playing Gretsch when he bought a used 1957 Duojet solid body for a reported 70 pounds. He went on to play a 1962 6122 Country Gentleman, then a 1963 Country Gentleman, and later that same year, a Tennessean that he played at Shea Stadium. Despite appearances, Harrison never had an endorsement deal with Gretsch, but he undoubtedly was one of the largest influences on demand for the guitars. See my dedicated video to learn more about the role of Gretsch guitars in George Harrison's time with the Beatles. Neil Young played a 6120 in Buffalo Springfield, and later both single and double cut White Falcons. All the other models went double cut in 62, including the very semi-solid guitars. By this point, they'd also begun using the Burns vibrato on the semi-solid models as an option. In addition, they launched a less expensive mahogany slab-bodied guitar called the Corvette. Reusing the name from an early single pickup hollow body, the new 6135 came in single and double pickup models with a variety of tailpiece and tremolo versions. As the Duojet style guitars were actually heavily chambered, this was the first truly solid body guitar from Gretsch. The first single pickup Corvette version echoed a Les Paul Jr., but it quickly evolved to more clearly borrow from Gibson's new SG guitars with beveled edges and pointier horns. The real innovation of the guitars was the Hilo'Tron pickups. The Hilo'Tron had come on the scene in '59 to replace the Dynasonic pickups in their lower-priced models. Though it might at first look like some sort of blacktop Filtertron, it actually housed just one coil positioned to the pole side, with a bar magnet on the opposite side and a steel plate linking the two. Like Filtertrons, they don't have a lot of output, but they do share the rich, dynamic, and chiming tone that can really bite when you just add a little bit of overdrive. They are certainly capable of delivering that great Gretsch sound. All the media exposure encouraged Gretsch to ramp up guitar production from their earlier 2,000 to 12,000 guitars annually. And even at that, Gretsch could not keep up with demand. In 1965, the guitar industry was rocked by the sale of Fender for $13 million. It was by far the most money ever paid for a guitar company to date. The Baldwin Organ Company had unsuccessfully bid for Fender. Soon afterward, they bought the British guitar and hardware company Burns Guitars. But they still wanted a guitar company of their own, so Baldwin now turned its attention to acquiring Gretsch. In 1967, Fred Gretsch announced to his top management that he was selling the company to Baldwin. Baldwin paid approximately $4 million and 10,000 shares of Baldwin common stock for the entire company. This was at a time when Gretsch was grossing in excess of $6 million a year. The ownership of Gretsch by Baldwin resulted in a number of predictable growing pains, with overall sales dropping by 12% in 1969 alone. So in 1970, in response, Baldwin decided to move manufacturing from their long-standing home in Brooklyn to Boonville, Arkansas. They were looking to cut costs and for a less expensive workforce. So by the early 70s, Gretsch had lost all connection with its roots in the long-standing headquarters in New York. Despite the cost-cutting, Gretsch wasn't making money for Baldwin. America seemed to have moved on from the influence of Atkins and the Beatles, and American youth were buying up Stratocasters and Les Pauls. By 1972, the 6120 Chet Atkins model evolved to become the 7660. Gone were the distinctive orange finish, the string mute system, back pad, and sealed top. It was a 16-inch body and went back to being 2 3/4 inches deep. The neck joint joined the body at the 18th fret instead of the 14th fret, more in the direction of a Gibson 335. There was also the squared-off pickguard of the Baldwin era and printed aluminum G control knobs. The gold hardware on the pickguard faded to silver by 1974. Though there were no doubt fine guitars produced at Baldwin during the 70s, in general, they have a reputation as being wildly inconsistent. Atkins had a couple of interesting successes with the Super Chet in 1971, the Atkins Axe, and then the Super Axe solid body models in the mid-70s. But in the early 70s, one of the most important modern Gretsch players would come on the scene, AC/DC's Malcolm Young. Starting on a White Falcon early in his career, Malcolm Young was later gifted a '63 Jet Firebird by his brother George. By the mid-70s, he'd added a middle humbucking pickup, but soon afterward, he began a process of simplifying the guitar. He first removed the middle, then the neck pickups, then stripped off its original red finish. Strung with 12s, including a wound third string, running down to the disengaged Burns vibrato, the extra string length is part of the sound. Eventually, just one volume control would run straight out to the amp. In 1979, Fred Gretsch Jr. passed away, and Atkins decided it was time to sever the long-standing relationship with Gretsch, and he moved over to Gibson in the early 80s. In the early 80s, Baldwin's parent company would go bankrupt, and they began selling off its musical divisions in the breakup of the company. So in October of 1984, Fred W. Gretsch, the great-grandson of Friedrich Gretsch, had a chance to buy the company back. The deal was finalized and announced in January of 1985. Not only did they no longer have a manufacturing facility, they didn't have the records of the original guitar specs. So they worked closely with Gretsch expert Duke Kramer and Gretsch collector Randy Bachman of the rock band Bachman-Turner Overdrive to produce the first prototypes that would be used to relaunch the brand. To build the guitars, they turned to Terada Musical Instruments in Japan. It took a few years to get it all up on its feet, but by 1989, the price list offered 8 electric archtops and 4 solid body style guitars. The jewel in this crown was, of course, the 6120 Nashville model. Since Atkins was now under contract to Gibson, they could no longer use his name. At this point, Gretsch went looking around for a new endorser to carry the banner. Neil Young was well known for using a White Falcon. Other modern Gretsch users included Martin Gore with Depeche Mode, the Cult's Billy Duffy, and Robert Smith with The Cure. But all of this was simply sniffing around the edges of the obvious choice, Brian Setzer. Setzer had bought his first 6120 in the late 1970s on Long Island, where he'd grown up. Launching the Stray Cats in the summer of 1980, their reception in the States was underwhelming, so they relocated to the UK, where they fared better, and had a chance to meet artist-producer Dave Edmunds. Rock This Town and Stray Cat Strut were hits in Europe, and they came back to the States opening for the Rolling Stones American Tour in 1981. Setzer went on to have a very successful solo career as well, in particular with the Brian Setzer Orchestra. In 2007, the original Stray Cats lineup toured again, and that allowed Setzer to get back to the roots that had led to his success. Setzer's main guitar was a 1959 6120, but in 1983, Setzer met Steve Miller, and after that meeting, Miller sent him a 1960 6120 that had been built in a batch shortly after Setzer's original guitar. The various Setzer signature models could fill a short history in themselves, but in short, they're based on his original 1959 guitar with its well-known modifications: Spertzel locking tuners, strap locks, dice control knobs, and a graphite nut. Many of my favorite modern players can be spotted playing Gretsch guitars. Beatles-loving Mike Campbell from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and his current band, the Dirty Knobs. And sideman to the Stars' Richard Bennett, most often seen with Mark Knopfler on the road, is another one who is frequently making unique music with a Gretsch. It seems ironic to me that the quintessential American guitar brand Gretsch found its stride having the guitars built in Japan. These were professional-level instruments that enjoyed all the workmanship and consistency that Japan had become known for. They've gone on to release many new and interesting variations on older styles of guitars since. Two of my favorites are the 6120 and 6122 Junior guitars released in 1998. They have downsized bodies of just 14 inches wide and are 2 1/4 inches deep, and came with laminate maple construction, ebony fingerboards, and the neoclassical fret markers. In 2002, Gretsch and Fender joined forces in an agreement where Fender oversees the marketing, manufacturing, and distribution, but Gretsch still owns and controls the brand. At the time of the transfer, Fender reworked every model, and they bought up some vintage Gretsch guitars to serve as models for this process, just as Fender had done when starting their own reissue program in the 80s. Along with the guitars in the Japanese line, there's also a strong showing of guitars in the Electromatic series and hollow body and semi-solid guitars that look back at the features from the golden years. John Cordy is putting one of these beauties through its paces in the intro and outro of the video. On the other end of the spectrum, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the extraordinary guitars coming out of the Gretsch Custom Shop in California. These amazing instruments have been showstoppers at recent NAMM shows and represent some of the best guitars ever to wear the Gretsch name. As I've worked on the research for this video, I've become convinced that if it wasn't for the factory's low output and the sale to Baldwin, Gretsch could have done everything that Fender and Gibson had done, and they'd have done it in a wonderfully different and unique Gretsch way. If only. I plan to make a separate video about the unique pickups used and developed by Gretsch, and this gave me an excuse to spend some time playing a current made-in-Japan Duojet. And completely by chance, my good friends at Ish Guitar got a used 6120 Junior in just as I was writing the script. That lives in my house now too. Further research tools, but hey, somebody's got to do it. If you enjoyed this video, you'd probably like the separate videos on the Duojet and the 6120 models. I can only fit so much here, so if I miss something important to you, or if you have your own Gretsch story, please put it in the comments for everyone to enjoy. First, I need to thank John Cordy for diving in and being a first-time Gretsch player for the video on the Electromatic Jet. When he asked what sort of thing I wanted, I simply said, think Malcolm, and you'll be right on track. I need to thank Jason Laughlin for playing his 6120 Golden Anniversary guitar for the video. I think you can get a sense of what artist he's channeling in that track. See the description for links to both their channels. I also need to thank Carter Vintage for sharing playing examples on vintage Gretsch guitars. And finally, I don't mention them enough, but the massive inventory and excellent photography of the guys at Guitar Point in Germany helped me find many other wonderful images here. And most of all, I need to thank the friends of 5 Watt. You're all 5 Watt world. I just make the videos. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that too. Like you're hanging with me until the end. Until next time, I'm Keith Williams. Thanks for being a part of the 5 Watt world.